Hello and welcome to the DSR Daily for Wednesday, November 13th. I'm your host for today, Riley Fessler, joined by Minna Stein. How are you feeling today, Minna?
A little bit better every day.
Well, that's comforting because I feel kind of worse after reading some of these news stories. I'm not going to lie.
That is valid. I understand that.
Some of these cabinet picks are pretty dicey, which, I can't be that surprised, but
Yesterday after we went through some of the cabinet picks, I was like, okay, it's not great. This isn't who I would have picked, but it could have been a lot worse.
yeah.
And then today, a new group of people has rolled in, and I am not feeling the same way about this group.
A new gaggle of morons has
A new gaggle of morons.
Chosen. Well, to get things started, President-elect Donald Trump is set to return to Washington, where he will meet with President Joe Biden at the White House, a visit marking the traditional transfer of power that Trump himself declined in 2020. This symbolic Oval Office meeting highlights a notable return for Trump, who left Washington in 2021 after being impeached for his role in the January 6th Capitol attack. Trump's reemergence comes as Republicans gain congressional control, aligning with his America First agenda under the leadership of Speaker Mike Johnson. As Biden pledges a smooth transition despite past tensions, the visit signals Trump's renewed influence in the GOP and underscores the deepening of partisan divides as the party elects a new leadership. Yeah, it shouldn't be a surprise that the Democrats are promising a smooth transition because that is what was promised. That is what they kind of ran on. Obviously, it was not something that the American people were interested in, but I'm glad that they're holding fast to that promise because it's important.
It's a pillar of democracy, one of our pillars of democracy, as Kamala Harris said in her concession speech, is our peaceful transition of power. So I'm glad that it does feel like a subtle dig at what happened in 2020. And so I'm glad that they're continuing to emphasize the importance of this moment in transitioning to a new administration. And speaking of our new administration, Pete Hegseth, a NATO skeptic and outspoken critic of progressive military policies, is being considered for Secretary of Defense under President Trump. His appointment could spark tension within the Pentagon, particularly with General C.Q. Brown, whom Hegseth has criticized for promoting left-wing views. Hegseth is known for advocating purging, quote, woke military leaders, and has questioned the merit of Brown's promotion, fueling division. His views on defense are nationalistic, focusing on reducing U.S. involvement in NATO and opposing further intervention in Ukraine, while emphasizing the threat posed by China. Really glad that this anti-woke Fox News host is going to be running the defense. Yeah. Seems like the perfect place for him to be.
Yeah. Also notable is he's also questioned the deployment of women in combat roles. So, he says I was reading a different article about him, and he claims that he values diversity in the military, but just not women. And of course, unsurprisingly, also very anti-trans members of the military. So I'm sure they will be removed immediately if he is nominated. I'm skeptical that this will be approved. I know Trump is trying to fast track approval for his cabinet secretaries, but this one seems like it might be a bridge too far. This guy has no experience other than just being a vet for Secretary of Defense. I guess we'll see. But this one, I feel like, of the ones we've seen so far, might face the most pushback. Whether that'll actually mean anything.
Let's hope so. We know stories of people who have gone to Trump and said, Mr. President, we need to fill this position. And he's like, well, why don't you just do it? And they're like, well, I'm an assistant. I don't have any, I don't know. And he's like, you should just run it. He doesn't really care if somebody has any experience. He just cares about loyalty, which is something that, the article that we talked about yesterday emphasized, which is these picks are really highlighting that loyalty is more important to this new administration then experiences, clearly.
Yeah, exactly.
Although I will point out, another day goes by, no RFK Jr.
Might need to get out the
nomination.
confetti soon. Because, we take the small victories and we can get them.
Exactly.
Well, another unfortunate story. President-elect Donald Trump announced that Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy will lead a new Department of Government Efficiency aimed at reducing federal bureaucracy and waste. Musk, prominent CEO with government contracts, and Ramaswamy, who has advocated for cutting federal agencies, are expected to push for drastic reductions in government spending and regulations. While Trump's proposal includes a bold target of eliminating $2 trillion in federal expenditures, experts doubt this is achievable without cuts to major programs. Critics, including federal worker unions, argue that the initiative may serve Musk's and Trump's interests rather than genuinely improving government efficiency. The department's work is set to conclude by July 4th, 2026, marking the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. Yeah, no shit, it's going to be self-serving.
And what a great way to celebrate the anniversary of the Declaration of Independence.
I mean, clear conflict of interest for especially Elon Musk, who has numerous government contracts. I mean, that seems obvious.
Yeah.
And then Vivek Ramaswamy is just an idiot. So, I mean, here's the thing. I don't actually necessarily disagree with the idea of a department to kind of streamline some government, because I do think some government spending is excessive and not efficient, but I don't want these two idiots to run it. That's for sure. And I don't want it under a Trump administration, because that just means cutting programs we don't like rather than actually targeting inefficiencies in the federal government and in federal spending. So it's kind of what Trump specializes in, which is isolating something that people kind of agree is a problem and then giving a completely ridiculous clown show solution to it that actually will only make the problem worse.
Yes, foreshadowing for the next 4 years, I'm sure. Yeah. Well, speaking of bad things happening and trying to do something about them, with 68 days remaining before Donald Trump takes office, California is urgently trying to protect its climate and clean air rules from potential revocation, especially its zero-emission vehicle mandates. Governor Gavin Newsom has appealed to President Joe Biden for help, seeking waivers for various regulations, but Trump could still overturn them once in power. While some officials remain hopeful, citing past approval waivers under Obama, others worry that Trump's administration will easily block or revoke pending requests without a lengthy process. California's efforts have already been slowed by Trump's election, with some regulations being removed from the agenda. So, a plea to Joe Biden to use his lame duck period for some good.
Great news for the fossil fuel industry and basically nobody else. And polluters, just widely speaking, but nobody else. But that's what people voted for. People are gonna reap what they sow with a lot of these things that just actually only impact everyday Americans and not the corporations and elites they say they hate so much. But
my hope is that some of these large corporations and other entities that contribute to the polluting will not want to make some of the changes because of how expensive it is to change and then change back with a new administration that implements the rules again. I think we saw that the last Trump presidency, where some of these entities kind of saw that, like, as soon as this administration is over, we're going to have to go back, and that's going to be more expensive than just keeping things the way they are. And I know that happened like in the Department of Education as well, where there were changes to things like Title IX, and a lot of colleges were like, we know it's going to change back as soon as this administration is out, and so we might as well just keep things the way that they are. That might just be something I'm telling myself so that I don't lose all senses of hope. But the one thing that I'm holding on to is that it might be too expensive to destroy the planet for 4 years and then go back to trying to be better.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like cope to me, but I hope you're right. Well, ending on an international story. The United Nations has reported that recent Israeli construction on along the demilitarized buffer zone with Syria, known as the Area of Separation, violates a long-standing ceasefire agreement, potentially escalating tensions in the Golan Heights. Satellite images and observations from the UN Disengagement Observer Force reveal that Israeli trenches and earthworks extend into restricted areas, prompting strong protests from Syria and repeated UN appeals to Israel. Israel argues that the trenches are a protective measure against infiltration by Iran-backed groups in Syria, particularly in light of recent regional conflicts. However, the UN remains concerned about breaches in the ceasefire zone, which could impact the fragile stability of the area amidst broader regional unrest. Yeah, this is only going to be more bold with the Trump administration, who, will just back anything Israel does, which, to all my liberal friends who couldn't vote for Kamala because of the war in Gaza, this is what you're going to get. You shouldn't have tacitly allowed somebody to get in office who clearly does not give a single shit about the people of the Middle East that are not Israeli, let alone Palestinians, let alone anyone else in the region. So it's going to get dramatically worse. Israel's only going to get more bold. If you needed proof of this, all you needed to do was look back to the Trump administration. But, we unfortunately have a short memory in the United States, and
we do.
U.S.
Very
voters
selective memory.
Have a shorter memory still. So, yeah, the things that some people claim to care about of why they couldn't vote for Kamala only going to get worse. So I hope you're happy. That's all I have to say to them. But on that note, that is all we have for you today. Unfortunately, once again, not really any good news today, but hopefully some good news will happen. We don't want this to only be depressing, but we report the news. So unfortunately, there just hasn't been a lot of good news lately. But
it's going to be a little rocky for a while, but I have a good feeling there's going to be some good news soon.
That makes one of us, Minna, but I'm glad that you're optimistic. Until tomorrow, bye-bye, everyone.